You are sitting on the floor of your closet tonight, going through an old box you have not opened in years, the kind of box that collects itself slowly without anyone deciding to start it. Somewhere near the bottom, underneath ticket stubs and old birthday cards, there is a photo you kept for reasons you can no longer fully explain, a picture that never quite made it into an album, one you have moved from house to house without ever throwing away. I know exactly why you kept that photo. I know the specific evening you almost threw it away and stopped yourself at the last second, telling yourself it was silly to keep something so small, and keeping it anyway because some part of you refused to let go of what it represented. You are not entirely sure yourself, not in words you could say out loud to someone else, but there is a part of you that has always known it meant something, that it represented a version of your life you were still quietly hoping for even when you stopped saying so. You have kept it hidden, tucked away, because showing it to someone else would mean admitting how much you still want the thing it represents. Have you ever kept something hidden simply because saying it out loud made the wanting feel too exposed? I did not come to you tonight to talk about a photograph in a box on your closet floor. I came to tell you something about a different photo, one you know nothing about, kept hidden by someone else, in a box very much like yours, in a house you have never seen, for reasons that have everything to do with you. Someone has been keeping something hidden for years, and it is closer to your story than you have ever imagined. This is not a story about coincidence. It is a story about how carefully I keep the things people are too afraid to say out loud, and how long I am willing to wait before I finally let two hidden things find each other. You have moved that photo from apartment to apartment, packed it carefully each time even when you were rushing, even when you told yourself you should probably just throw it away since it does not mean what it used to. Something in you has never actually agreed to let it go, no matter how many times you have told yourself it is silly to keep it. Stay with me tonight, because what I am about to show you will change the way you understand every year you have spent feeling forgotten in the dark. There is a specific kind of pain in feeling hidden, not chosen, not seen, passed over quietly while the rest of the world seems to move forward without you. You have watched people who started their search for love long after you did already find it, already build the life you are still waiting for, and you have smiled through every announcement while something inside you quietly asked, why not me yet? Why does everyone else's story seem to move at a normal pace while mine sits frozen somewhere in a box no one has opened? You have started to wonder if you are simply the kind of person love forgets, not because anything is wrong with you exactly, but because it feels statistically strange that everyone else's timeline moves and yours does not. There is a specific way this hiding shows up in the smallest daily choices, the way you have started setting the table for one without thinking twice about it, the way you have stopped saving the good dishes for a someday that keeps not arriving, using them instead on an ordinary Tuesday because waiting for a special occasion that never comes started to feel like its own quiet form of grief. You have learned to build a full life around an empty chair, filling every other seat at the table with friends and hobbies and work, and still noticing the chair every single time you sit down. Do you know the specific quiet you sit inside on a Saturday night when there is nowhere you have to be and no one waiting for you to arrive? There is a version of this hiding that shows up in your own reflection, the way you have started avoiding certain conversations at family gatherings, changing the subject before anyone can ask the question you have heard too many times already. You have become skilled at redirecting attention away from yourself in these moments, not because you are ashamed, but because the same question asked for the 100th time costs something different than it did the first time. You carry a private fear some nights that you have simply been overlooked, that somewhere a list was made and your name did not make it onto the page, that everyone else received an invitation to something you were never actually included in. You do not say this out loud because it sounds dramatic when spoken, but alone, in the quiet, it feels like the most honest thing you know. You have also learned a particular kind of vigilance around your own hope, monitoring it the way someone monitors a wound that keeps almost healing and then reopening, careful not to let yourself feel too much excitement about anything that might disappoint you again. You call this being realistic. Some nights, alone, you wonder if it is actually something closer to fear wearing the more respectable name of caution. There is also a financial weight underneath some of this waiting, the quiet calculation of whether you could even build a life with someone right now given everything else you are managing, a calculation that makes love feel like a luxury reserved for people with fewer complications than you currently carry. You have prayed about this waiting more times than you can count, and there have been long stretches where the praying itself began to feel like talking to an empty room, sending words upward and hearing nothing return, until even prayer started to feel like one more thing you were quietly doing alone. I see the version of you that laughs easily with friends and the version that goes home afterward and sits with the silence, and I want you to know both versions are equally known to me, equally loved by me, neither one required to perform certainty in front of me the way you sometimes perform it in front of everyone else. There is a particular exhaustion in explaining yourself to people who mean well but do not understand, the aunt who suggests you are simply too picky, the friend who tells you to just put yourself out there more, as though the entire complexity of this waiting could be solved with slightly more effort on your part. You smile and nod because arguing feels like more energy than you have left to spend, but something in you quietly wants to say that effort was never the missing ingredient. You have not been forgotten. You have been hidden, and there is an enormous difference between the two that I am about to show you tonight. Forgotten means abandoned, left behind, erased from consideration entirely. Hidden means kept, protected, set apart on purpose for a moment that has not yet arrived. You have been living as though you were the first, when the entire time you have actually been the second. When the hiding feels this uncomfortable, the instinct is almost always to search for certainty anywhere it can be found, even in places that were never designed to hold it. There is a king in Scripture whose desperation for certainty led him somewhere he had spent his entire reign forbidding others to go. His name was Saul, and toward the end of his life, facing a war he was terrified he would lose, unable to reach me through the usual channels of prayer or prophecy because his own disobedience had created distance between himself and me, he did something he knew was wrong. He disguised himself and went to a medium at Endor, a woman who practiced exactly the kind of divination he had outlawed throughout his own kingdom, seeking answers through a source he had no business consulting. He was desperate for certainty about his future, and when the proper channels seemed silent, he turned to a counterfeit one instead. Have you ever felt so desperate for an answer about your own future that you searched in places you already suspected were wrong? Some of you have done a gentler version of exactly this. You have read horoscopes during a hard week, not because you fully believed them, but because uncertainty about something this important felt unbearable and any answer, even a manufactured one, felt better than none at all. Some of you have asked friends to interpret signs for you, a song that played twice, a name that came up unexpectedly, searching for meaning anywhere you could find it because waiting on silence felt like more than you could carry alone. There is a specific loneliness in trying to figure out, entirely on your own, what you might be doing wrong, replaying old conversations, wondering if a different version of yourself would have been chosen already, treating your own personality like a variable that needs adjusting rather than a person worth loving as you already are. This kind of private investigation rarely produces the clarity it promises. It mostly produces exhaustion, and a quieter, harder version of the same waiting you started with. Some of you have tried to manufacture the future through sheer force of research and planning, analyzing every past relationship for patterns, treating your own heart like a puzzle that simply needs the correct combination applied to it, believing that if you can just diagnose what has gone wrong before, you can engineer what goes right this time entirely through your own understanding. None of this makes you foolish. It makes you someone who was trying to survive uncertainty without fully trusting that anyone, including me, was actually managing it. There is a difference between bringing me your desperation directly, honestly, even angrily, and going around me entirely to find an answer somewhere else because you have decided my silence means I am not going to respond. Saul did not simply feel desperate. He acted on that desperation by seeking a counterfeit source instead of continuing to bring his fear honestly before me, even when my apparent silence made that feel pointless. Saul's story did not end well, not because I am unwilling to work with desperate people, but because his desperation led him to seek answers from a source that could never actually give him what he needed, a source that offered the appearance of certainty without any of its substance. There is a quieter version of Saul's mistake that shows up simply in obsessive checking, refreshing a profile, rereading an old message for the 100th time, searching for a hidden meaning that was never actually there, treating tiny fragments of information like a medium treats tea leaves, desperate for a sign because plain, patient trust has started to feel unbearable. This too is understandable. It is also, gently, a version of searching for certainty in a place that was never built to hold it. I want you to hear something important underneath this warning. It was never wrong for Saul to want to know what was coming. It was the source he trusted that was the actual problem. You are allowed to want certainty about this waiting. You are not required to manufacture it through horoscopes, or obsessive analysis, or any other counterfeit source promising answers that only I can actually give you honestly, in my own timing. There is a man in Scripture whose entire story is defined by being hidden for years, forgotten by the very people who could have helped him sooner, and it is the closest thing to your own story I can show you tonight. His name was Joseph, and he was sold into slavery by his own brothers as a teenager, taken to Egypt, and eventually thrown into prison for a crime he did not commit. For years, he sat hidden away in that prison, forgotten by his family who believed him dead, forgotten by the household that once trusted him, invisible to almost everyone who had ever known him. While he was there, he interpreted a dream for a fellow prisoner, a cupbearer who was later restored to Pharaoh's court. Joseph asked him plainly to remember him once he was free, to mention his name, to help him get out of the place he had been hidden in for so long. The cupbearer forgot him. For 2 full years, he simply forgot, going about his restored life in the palace while Joseph remained exactly where he had been left, hidden, waiting, wondering if he would ever be remembered by anyone at all. Have you ever done everything right, asked clearly for what you needed, and then simply been forgotten by the very people you were counting on? 2 years is long enough to lose hope entirely, long enough to stop believing anyone is coming, long enough to wonder if the promise you once felt so certain about was simply something you imagined rather than something I actually placed in you. Joseph had every reason, after 2 years, to assume he had been permanently forgotten, and Scripture never tells us he stopped believing entirely, only that he kept living faithfully inside a place that gave him no evidence his faith was justified. I want you to sit with those 2 years for a moment, because they matter more than the story usually gives them credit for. Joseph was not being punished during that time. He was not forgotten by me even while he was forgotten by the cupbearer. He was being hidden on purpose, kept in exactly the right place, being shaped in patience and character for a role he could not yet imagine, positioned so precisely that when Pharaoh finally needed a dream interpreted, Joseph was the only person available who could actually do it. When the moment finally came, it came suddenly, without warning, exactly the way these things almost always do. Joseph was pulled from the prison in a single day, cleaned up, brought before Pharaoh, and elevated to the second most powerful position in Egypt, all within hours of what had felt like an entire lifetime of being hidden and forgotten. The years in prison were never wasted. They were the exact preparation that made him ready to save an entire nation, and eventually his own family, from a famine that had not even begun yet when he was sitting forgotten in that cell. Consider also that Joseph did not know, sitting in that cell, that a famine was coming that would eventually threaten his entire family, the very brothers who had sold him. He could not have imagined that his years of hidden preparation were not only for his own sake, but for the survival of people who had wronged him. His hiding served a purpose far larger than his own personal restoration, one he could not have designed himself even if he had tried. This is what I want you to receive about your own hidden years tonight. You have not been forgotten by me, even in the seasons where you have felt forgotten by everyone else, even in the specific ache of being overlooked while others moved forward. You are being hidden the way Joseph was hidden, prepared in a place you cannot yet see the purpose of, positioned precisely for a moment that will arrive suddenly, without the long warning you have been hoping for. Think about the specific moment the cupbearer finally remembered him, not because 2 years had built toward some slow, visible improvement, but because Pharaoh had a dream no one else in his court could interpret, and the cupbearer suddenly recalled the man he had forgotten in prison. The remembering did not happen gradually. It happened all at once, triggered by a need Joseph had no control over and no way of predicting from inside his cell. This is often exactly how it works. The waiting feels endless and flat, and then a single unrelated event on the other side of the story becomes the reason everything moves at once. Your years of feeling passed over are not proof that you were left off a list. They are the prison years before the day everything changes in a single afternoon. Let me show you what this looks like in a life that resembles yours far more than an ancient Egyptian prison ever could. There was a woman named Sarah who kept a photo in her wallet for almost a decade, a picture cut from an old magazine years earlier of a home she had once imagined herself living in someday, a small detail she had never told anyone about because it felt embarrassing to admit she still carried something so specific and so old. She had long since stopped believing that particular image would ever become real, and she kept the photo more out of habit than hope by that point. In a different state, a man named Marcus had spent years quietly sketching, an old hobby he rarely showed anyone, drawings of a life he imagined for himself someday, including, more than once without fully realizing the pattern, a small house with a particular kind of porch he had never actually seen anywhere in real life, only in his own imagination. Neither of them had ever met. Neither of them knew the other existed. Sarah's photo and Marcus's sketches were separated by hundreds of miles and years of time, two private, hidden pictures of a future neither of them had any evidence was actually coming. In the years between the drawing and the relocation, Marcus had dated other people, none of whom ever quite fit the picture he could not fully explain even to himself. He was not comparing them to Sarah, since he did not know she existed, but there was a specific quality he kept looking for and kept not finding, a steadiness he could recognize only by its absence. He had nearly convinced himself that the quality he was looking for existed only in his own imagination and not in an actual person anywhere. A work relocation brought Marcus to Sarah's city 8 years after he first drew that porch, a move he almost declined because it meant leaving behind a life he had built and felt comfortable in. Sarah, around that same time, had finally agreed to let a coworker set her up on a date she almost canceled twice out of sheer exhaustion with the entire process of trying. The date happened anyway. Marcus mentioned, almost as a passing comment while describing his new apartment, that he had always wanted a small house with a specific kind of wraparound porch, the exact image he had been sketching for years without ever finding the words to explain why it mattered so much to him. Sarah went quiet for a moment, then pulled the old, worn photo out of her wallet and showed him. Marcus later admitted he had almost thrown the notebook away the year before, embarrassed by how attached he still was to a drawing of a house he had never even seen in real life, convinced that keeping it meant he was somehow stuck in an old daydream instead of living in the present. He kept it anyway, tucked in a drawer, the same way Sarah kept her photo tucked in her wallet behind cards she rarely used. They sat there for a long moment, two people who had each privately kept a hidden picture of the same imagined future for years, without ever telling anyone why it mattered, finally realizing they had been picturing pieces of the same life the entire time they thought they were simply daydreaming alone. Sarah had shown that photo to exactly no one in 8 years, not her closest friend, not her own sister, because she worried it made her sound like she was still holding onto something childish. Marcus had never fully explained his sketches to anyone either, brushing off questions about them with a joke whenever someone flipped through his old notebooks. Both of them had quietly decided their private hope was something to manage alone rather than something worth sharing, until the night it turned out they had been sharing it the entire time without knowing it. I am not telling you this story to promise you a specific porch or a specific magazine photo. I am telling you this so you understand that the picture you have kept hidden, whether it is an actual photograph or simply a private imagining you have never said out loud, may already be forming in someone else's heart in ways neither of you can currently measure. What feels like a private, slightly embarrassing thing you have kept to yourself may be the exact detail that finally confirms, one day, that you were never picturing it alone. Do you remember sitting on the floor of your closet at the beginning of this, holding that photo you have never quite been able to throw away? I want you to hear this now with the full weight it deserves. You were never forgotten. You were hidden, kept in exactly the place I needed you to be, prepared in ways you could not see, the same way Joseph was hidden in that prison for years before a single afternoon changed everything he thought he understood about how long forgotten actually lasts. Read that again if you need to. The photo you have kept hidden was never foolish. It was never something to be embarrassed about. It was evidence, kept quietly, of a hope you were never actually wrong to carry, even during the years it felt like carrying it alone made you strange for still believing. You are not strange for hoping specifically. You are not overly attached for wanting a particular kind of kindness, a particular kind of steadiness, a particular feeling you have carried since long before you could fully explain it. The specificity of your hope has never embarrassed me the way it has sometimes embarrassed you in front of other people. Someone has been carrying a version of the same hidden hope, the same private picture, the same quiet certainty they could not fully explain to anyone else either. You do not have to explain the specific shape of what you have been hoping for to anyone who would not understand it anyway. You do not owe an explanation for the photo in your wallet, the sketch in your notebook, the quiet imagining you have never said out loud. What matters is not whether anyone else understood it. What matters is whether I did, and I have understood every single detail of it since before you first hid it away. This is the sentence I want you to carry out of this moment tonight. What you have kept hidden was never wasted, and the years you spent feeling forgotten were the exact years I was preparing the very thing you were hiding for. Let me pray this over you now, the way I have already been praying it over you long before tonight. Heavenly Father, I bring before you the one reading these words right now, the one who has kept something hidden for years, whether a photo, a hope, a private picture of a future they were afraid to say out loud. Give them wisdom tonight to see their hidden years the way Joseph's hidden years eventually made sense, not as evidence of being forgotten, but as evidence of being prepared for something they could not yet imagine. Give them courage to stop being ashamed of what they have quietly hoped for, the specific image they have carried, the particular kind of love they have never fully described to anyone because it felt too vulnerable to say out loud. Heal whatever wound convinced them that hoping specifically, rather than generally, made them foolish or overly attached to an outcome they could not control. Protect their mind from the exact lie that being overlooked by people means being overlooked by you. Heal the ache of every family gathering where the question came one too many times, every quiet Saturday night spent wondering if their name had somehow been left off a list everyone else received. Remind them that Joseph sat in that prison for years without a single visible sign that anything was changing, and everything was changing the entire time. Restore their trust in the small, private details they have kept hidden, the sketches, the photos, the quiet imaginings they never told anyone about, so that they stop treating those details as embarrassing and start recognizing them as the exact threads you are already weaving together on both sides of a story they cannot yet see completely. Provide for whatever practical weight makes this waiting heavier than it needs to be, whether that is financial pressure, family pressure, or simply the exhaustion of explaining themselves to people who do not understand why they are still waiting for something specific instead of settling for whatever comes first. Ease the specific tiredness of having to justify a hope they have never been able to fully explain to people who love them but do not carry the same picture they are carrying. Speak comfort over every ordinary evening this week that feels indistinguishable from the last. Every quiet dinner for one, every conversation redirected away from a painful question, every small moment of self-doubt that creeps in uninvited. Let them recognize that ordinary evenings are not empty time. They are the exact material patience is made from, the same material that shaped Joseph in a cell and Ruth in a field and David in a cave long before any of them could see what it was building toward. Give them patience for the specific kind of remembering that happens suddenly rather than gradually, the way Joseph was remembered in a single day after 2 years of silence, so they stop measuring their progress by how flat and unchanging each individual week feels and start trusting that the actual turning point rarely announces itself in advance. Give them breakthrough in the exact place they quietly stopped expecting one, and restore whatever has been strained in their family relationships during these hidden years, wherever comparison or misunderstanding has added weight instead of comfort. Give them peace tonight that does not require the hiding to end immediately, a peace that settles into a person simply because they finally believe their years in the prison, however long they last, are being used rather than wasted. Strengthen them spiritually in whatever remains of this season, so that when they are finally brought out of hiding, the way Joseph was brought out in a single day, they arrive ready, whole, and prepared for exactly what has been built for them, rather than arriving exhausted and bitter from a weight they believed was empty. If these words found the exact place in you that needed them tonight, let it be known, even if only to me, even if you never say it out loud to a single other person. Someone else you love is likely keeping a hidden photo of their own, quietly, the same way you have been, and they may need to hear tonight that their hidden years are not wasted either. You are not forgotten in a box no one will ever open. You are hidden in exactly the place I need you to be, and the day this changes will arrive the way it always does, suddenly, completely, and without the long warning you have been waiting for. Let them stop apologizing, even quietly to themselves, for hoping specifically instead of generally, for wanting a particular kind of love instead of simply any love that arrives first. Let them trust that specificity was never foolishness. It was simply an early glimpse of something you had already begun preparing long before they knew to hope for it. Give them the grace to hold their hidden years with tenderness rather than resentment, to look back one day the way Joseph eventually looked back at his own prison years, and recognize every part of it as necessary rather than wasted. Let them sleep tonight without needing an answer for exactly when the hidden season ends, trusting instead that the timing has already been decided even though the reason for the delay has not yet been explained to them. Let them wake tomorrow with a little more willingness to be gentle toward themselves about how long this has taken, releasing whatever quiet self-blame has crept in during the longer, harder stretches of this waiting. Surround them this week with small, unexpected reminders that they have not been forgotten, a message from an old friend, an answered prayer they almost overlooked, a moment of unexpected peace in the middle of an otherwise ordinary day. Let these small things function the way the cupbearer's memory eventually functioned for Joseph, proof that remembering can arrive suddenly even after a very long silence. You will look back on this exact season one day and recognize it, the way Joseph recognized his own prison years, not as the part of the story that almost broke you, but as the part that quietly made everything after it possible. Rest now. What was hidden is already being prepared to be revealed, and the reveal, when it comes, will make sense of every quiet year that came before it.